Welcome back to Peak Experience. Today's episode is a special one because we're talking about a major shift in focus for someone many of you already know well, Dr. Robert Forto. For years, Robert has built businesses, led teams, taught at the university level, and created organizations across industries, including dog training, media, education, and leadership development. Now he's bringing much of that work into sharper focus through Dreamchaser Leadership. Today, we're talking about why now, what this means, what is staying the same, and where he's headed next. I'm your host, Michele Forto. Many of you may have heard me on this feed before, and we have a lot in store for you. So please subscribe and follow the podcast.
From First Paw Media, sponsored by Dreamchaser Leadership in Anchorage, Alaska. This is the Peak Experience Podcast. Here we talk about leadership, team building, strategic management, and organizational development. Visit our website, peakexp.org. Now, here are your hosts, Robert and Michele Forto.
Robert, welcome back to Peak Experience. I am ready to start asking you some questions. Let's start off with number one. You've built several successful organizations over the years. What made this the right time to shift more of your focus toward Dreamchaser Leadership?
Well, a lot of you guys know that have followed the show that I've been on this 12 to 14 year journey. I started school for a second time in 2014 on a bet for my daughter, and I started in the HPR department at UAA, the University of Alaska, Anchorage, and we focused a lot on outdoor leadership, and we'll jump into a little bit about that in a second. Then I went into a master's degree in leadership and later into a doctorate in leadership. So yeah, it's been a lot of leadership training over the years, but it was all building up to this. The whole time in the back of my mind, I had a project that I was working on called Dreamchaser Leadership. Every paper I wrote, every project I did, everything I thought about on the trail and off was leading up to today.
So when you say that you've been building this for years and it wasn't a sudden decision, can you expand upon that? What did it take to really get this going and to build it?
So aside from the 3 degrees and 12 years of literally banging my head against the wall, trying to get papers out every week, I was really excited about coaching and experiential learning and that sort of thing. So I guess it was in 2019 or so, I headed down to Colorado to take a course through a company called Training Wheels. It was with a lady, Michelle Cummings, who I had met several years before at an AEE conference. And I told her at that point, at some point, I'm going to take your course and we're going to offer this type of class in Alaska. And like I said, that was 2019, I guess. It was definitely before COVID. And here we are today with the official kickoff, liftoff of this company.
You know, it is exciting, and just to see the rebirth, if you will, of this company that we did start during COVID. But you've said that this isn't about starting over, but it's more about sharpening focus. What exactly do you mean by sharpening focus?
Well, there's that old leadership mantra, iron sharpens iron. And I thought about that when I was thinking about how we were going to move into this next level. For many years, Michele, as you know, my focus has been everywhere. It's been 30% on DogWorks, 30% on mushing, 10% on teaching at the university, 10% on Mushing Magazine, 5% on other ventures like a coffee company and all of that. Literally, my time was spent everywhere. Probably 15 hours a day. We're just jamming out projects. And I just had to sit down and figure out what was next. And I mentioned this to you just the other day. I said, this is it. We're going to do this. I was sitting at the Alaska Lounge in the Seattle airport, and we made the decision this was going to be maybe not the outcome, but at least the journey.
You know, Robert, that is pretty important what you just said. You really dialed in what it feels like when people describe having too much on their plate or spreading themselves too thin. Nowhere in those percentages that I know you just kind of threw out there, nowhere in those percentages, though, did I hear you say that you had given any part of you or your time to me and your family. So that's kind of an important little thing there. And as far as leadership goes, a big key is not spreading yourself too thin. Am I right?
Well, I'm not a big fan of buffets, but I guess I was going to the buffet every day and trying to get as much on my plate as possible. But I think I equated to about 15 hours a day. There's still 9 hours left, and I am a typical 6 or 7 hour sleeper. So that does leave an hour or two for family and personal time.
Oh, that's pretty generous. So what should people think about this next chapter?
As you know, when I get started in something, I'm all in. I have always been one that dives headfirst into the deep end. I learned how to swim in the deep end, not with, little floaty paddles and all that sort of stuff. My dad literally threw me in the deep end of the pool and said, figure out how to get to the side. Otherwise, you're going to be here for a minute. So that's where we got started. So jumping in with head first, followed by a distinct plan on how we're going to do this was the best way to think about this new chapter. And like we've talked about, I cannot keep focusing on other things that I'm fully confident that you guys, as the other members of the team, and of course, other people that are taking part in these ventures are going to be able to help us out and achieve these goals.
Absolutely. And, you did mention a couple of our adventures, so many of the people that listen to this podcast also know about Alaska Dog Works and our media company, First Paw Media, that is the home of many different things, including Dogworks Radio, Mushing Podcast, and Mushing Magazine. What would you say to those wondering if you're leaving those ventures behind?
Definitely not leaving them behind. I hoped to be able to delegate a little bit more. Through all this leadership training, I learned it is best to delegate when possible. We are bringing on several people to help us out in these ventures. We were just talking about, before we went to recording, about people helping us out with our Mushing Magazine venture. Of course, Alaska Dog Works is our passion, our way that we pay our bills. We definitely cannot let that slide, but I am fully confident in not only our daughter Nicole taking over more of the reins with that, but of course you are the forward-facing person of that business, so you're going to continue on with that. So definitely not leaving it behind, just dedicating a lot more time to this next chapter.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to take a short break and we will be right back.
Leadership is not learned in comfort. It is forged through challenge, uncertainty, and action. It's time for another memorable moment in leadership history, sponsored by Dreamchaser Leadership and Peak Experience, providing experiential leadership development, strategic coaching, and team building programs designed for real-world results.
Today, we're talking about Ernest Shackleton and endurance. When his ship was crushed by ice, he shifted from mission to survival. The lesson? Adapt quickly when reality changes. And a mantra? Protect the people first. Okay, we are back, Robert. Let's move on to the next question, shall we? Dreamchaser Leadership talks a lot about practical leadership and experiential learning. Why do you think that approach matters right now?
For years, I have been teaching through experience, and that's exactly what experiential learning is. I have always been a hands-on learner. I am not an audio or visual learner. I am one that gets in there, gets their hands dirty, and try to figure out the answer to the problem. And I think the best way that people learn is that way. And I think I have the experience and the tools to be able to offer that.
I agree, Robert. Learning by doing is really key, especially in how fast-paced today's world is. But what are leaders getting wrong when they rely only on theory?
This is a great question. As many of you guys know, I teach dog mushing at 2 universities here in Alaska, and in particular at Alaska Pacific University. And we use our sled dogs as a metaphor for leadership and team building. And I think so many people today, especially since the advent of social media and everything at our fingertips, everybody thinks that they can learn any skill that they want to learn just by learning it through social media or whatever. And I don't think that's the best way to do it. When you're out there and doing the thing, you can easily apply those concepts and those constructs directly to the problem at hand. And what a better way to do that than with a team of sled dogs. They are the perfect metaphor for teaching leadership. We could break this down and probably have episode after episode of it. But would you rather learn from an academic journal, some other group of people or team telling you this is what leadership should be? Or should you be on the back of a dog sled and having 8 canine buddies pull you down the trail and you're figuring out why this team is not firing on all cylinders?
You know, Robert, you bring up a pretty good point here, and I want to expand on it just a little bit about social media. There are a lot of leadership clips out there, shorts and reels and, quick little quotes that people are spouting out there trying to teach leadership theory. And none of them really resonate. And here's why. Because they literally are just creating more noise. This isn't like pulling up a YouTube video real quick so that you can learn how to restring your edger for your grass, right? Where you really do need to see how the parts go back together. Leadership is not as clearly defined. It's not tangible. There's a lot of nuance there, and you kind of have to feel it.
Yeah, it's a soft skill, 100%. You're going to learn what you're going to learn in school, book learning, if you will, but you need to get out there and do it. The best leaders are the ones that are working with their teams. I have never respected, I guess is the right word, of people that are just sitting in an office somewhere and sort of just leading by design. I think that they ought to be down there and doing the thing. I mean, when you think about some of the greatest leaders in at least U.S. business history, like Henry Ford and Steve Jobs and Goodyear and all of those folks that really did the thing, they were in the trenches themselves. I mean, the best example is Elon Musk. That dude literally slept on his factory floor as he was working his way to building his companies. And what worked out for him? He is probably the richest man in the world.
Well, that is probably true. And while I know that you have bled, slept, and eaten with your sled dogs, we certainly are not anywhere near being the richest people in the world. That being said, you have worked in business, academia, media, and high-pressure environments. How have those different worlds shaped the way you coach leaders today?
I think the number one answer to that is experience. Working every day, my entire life, I've never been employed by a company, a firm, if you will. I've never earned a paycheck from a company that took out benefits and all that. So I had to learn by doing. As an entrepreneur, starting back in, I don't know, when I was 7 or 8 years old with a paper route, all the way up to today, it has shaped my experience and, of course, my entrepreneurial journey through that. And then everything that I've done throughout that time has built upon each other. I've used a lot of concepts in my dog training business that I use in our dog mushing business. I've used a lot of things I've learned in school and through theory and book learning in how we do marketing. I have learned how we do things in our media company that shapes how we do things in our dog training company. And they just sort of all go together, sort of like this massive Venn diagram. And all of them are sort of coming together right there in the center. And there is a lot of symmetry there.
Would you describe yourself then as a lifelong learner? I mean, I know that you had a short stint working at a convenience store while you were in college, and that pretty much was your only time working for the man. Otherwise, you've been the man.
Yeah, I remember those days at working in 7-Eleven. The only reason I was there is I got a little bit of a discount on beer. And the 7-Eleven was right on the college campus. I would work the night shift, so I would go to school all day and then show up at that job 2 or 3 days a week to get that little bit of a discount on beer, play a little bit of Keno, which was the daily numbers lottery there in Portland, Oregon at the time. And then on the off days, I was saving a little bit of that change that I had to fuel my rock band adventures. So everything sort of worked upon itself. But yeah, that was the only time I ever earned a check, if you will. I didn't work there very long. I was only making something like, but to answer your question about being the lifelong learner, it literally did take me to 54 years old before I was finally done with school. I told you many a times, Michele, there was a reason I wanted to stay in school so long, and it wasn't necessarily for the very expensive piece of paper that was hanging on the wall, but it was literally so I didn't have to pay back student loans. And of course, that didn't work out too well as I finished and I said I was done at that point. But yeah, lifelong learning continues on here in my mid-50s. I don't know what's next on the formal learning side, but I learn every day by doing something, and hopefully this type of business will allow me to share that education with other people as well.
That sounds fantastic, Robert. I know that you have taught me quite a few things in the time that we've shared together, and I look forward to always finding out what you've learned for the day. So, what kinds of people or organizations are the best fit for Dreamchaser Leadership right now?
We mentioned a bit ago about going to the company Training Wheels in Colorado. And just a couple of days ago, as we're recording this, I came back from a networking event at the same company there in Littleton. And one of the things that we did was a session on building business. And of course, there were a lot of people there. Funny enough, many of them were middle-aged, people my age, either a little bit younger, a little bit older, and a lot of them were very interested in starting businesses as their own, whether they're coming off their first career and getting ready to retire or thinking about a side gig or whatever. But we did a pretty intensive session on building a business. And one of the first things that you do in business is figure out who your target audience is. Who do you want to serve? And, we literally put the pen to paper, and I came up with a couple. And one of the biggest types of organizations that I want to work with are the very small family businesses. And those are the same type of businesses I worked on in my doctorate program. We're thinking about mom and pop type businesses, typically under 25 people, typically in the service sector. So they're offering some type of service. They're not widget makers or, in an industry like a restaurant or a bar or something like that. They're literally providing a service to someone. And I want to be able to provide coaching services and advice and programming for people that are struggling in building effective teams from the ground up. And these are not companies with massive budgets. These are not companies with, different departments. It's probably one or two guys that are wearing all of the hats, and they're trying their best to make sure they make their ends meet, whatever that means to them. And of course, they may not know that they're in the midst of leadership struggles. And my hope is to being able to coach them along the way and provide them some insight to allow them to do just a little bit better tomorrow.
So, can you give us one example of something that you would expect to hear from one of these smaller mom and pop style service businesses that they might be struggling on that you could fix in one or two leadership sessions with them?
I think a great example is a small law firm. I know that you have another hat that you wear, and you work as a paralegal in a small law firm here in the Mat-Su Valley, and you have a team of about 7, 8, 9 people or so. And I'm sure that you guys have pretty good teamwork, but you probably struggle on a thing or two. Each person has a silo or two that they feel very comfortable in. Well, my job would be to come in there and to provide some activity to be able to bring you guys a little bit closer. We talked a little bit ago about dog mushing experiences. What a cool way to bring in your very small team at your law firm and bring you guys together in an experience that you've never done before. And I know that you guys do team building exercises. You go to lunch on Fridays and you do that sort of thing, but you've never truly bonded in a professional way as a team. You guys may have done exercises and that sort of thing, but you've never really figured out what happens when the roles shift. Have you?
Not in that dynamic where with the role shifting and those that are in leadership would no longer be in a leadership position, as you're suggesting. And so, yeah, I find it really fascinating how in experiential learning, you really are taking apart the machine, right? You are, when you walk into the room to do one of these experiential learning workshops, there is no hierarchy. Everything is lost at the door, so to speak. And there isn't a boss. There isn't a manager. There aren't subordinates. Everybody is walking into the room and at equal footing.
Yeah, when we were at this networking event at the Training Wheels, one of the final things that we did, we called it building bridges, and there were several tasks that we had to do in order to finish. One of them was building a bridge out of kind of dowel rod type things. You had to build this bridge with a team of 3, and you had to build this in a way where it would support the weight of a cell phone. And then a couple other people from your team would have to go over and do another puzzle. And then a couple other people from your team would have to go over and do another puzzle. And we didn't have a lot of instruction. We just said, okay, these are our tasks. We have 45 minutes to do them. We're not going to tell you who should do what. We didn't say, you're going to be the leader of this. You're going to be on this team. Everybody had to work together to finish these tasks. And I think learning by doing is the best way to accomplish things like that. We were all sort of thrown into the fire, so to speak, and we were under a time limit. We had these tools that we had to work with. And it's a great metaphor to how we have to work through projects at our 9-to-5 jobs. I know in a law firm, you guys get a brand new case. You may have the pieces to put it together, but you not quite sure what needs to be done. You know, you may have this attorney that may have expertise in this area of the law, and this attorney over here may have expertise in this form of the law. And maybe this paralegal is very versed in contract law, and maybe your legal assistant is very well versed in filings, and you may need a notary, and you may need some marketing support, and all sorts of things come together. And often you don't think about these pieces until you're presented with the puzzle. And I think that this type of experiential learning will provide things to do to meet these challenges. I'm sure you would agree.
I didn't know you worked there too. You pretty much nailed everybody in the office. So let's pivot just a little bit. When you look ahead over the next few years, what are you most excited to build through Dreamchaser Leadership?
I think more importantly is our coaching offerings. Being up here in Alaska, we're in a special place. We have a very limited pool, if you will, of organizations that we can work with. So I'm excited to see how we can branch out a little bit, whether it be in the Pacific Northwest or in, the western states of the United States. That is one thing I'm really excited about. Definitely want to get our feet wet here in Alaska. I definitely feel excited about how we can offer a very unique experience to organizations. I know there are a lot of companies out there that do team building exercises, and they go to challenge courses and to, miniature golf and bowling and all these sorts of things. Escape rooms are very popular, but I don't think anybody has the type of experiences that we can develop to provide tangible experiences and outcomes that you would receive by doing some of these quote unquote easier activities.
Right. And in some of those activities that you just described, it really doesn't have that great of a correlation back to the dynamics of leadership, not in a way that a sled dog team does. And so my one last question that I really want to ask you is, what exactly do you mean when you say that you can learn all that you need to learn from a sled dog team?
Well, let's make one thing clear. We're not just going to use our sled dogs as the only metaphor. That's just going to be one program that we offer. It's called Unleashing Excellence. It is a multi-day program using those sled dogs as a team building activity. That is just one piece of this. We're going to offer other things. We talked about experiential learning activities. These could be in the way of games or other activities that allow us to do that. There are going to be coaching opportunities where it be one-on-one as well as group coaching. We have a pretty good plan set out on a group type coaching program that is very effective. It's a program that we went through for several years right out of our experience with COVID. We've taken that model and expanded on a little bit to include this type of business. And I think other ways that we can meet the needs, like we said, Alaska is a special place, but man, there are a lot of places out there that could use this type of experience. Now, we talked a little bit about other activities and how they could be good conduits for team building or leadership exercises. Of course, you could do that, whether it be going to a day of bowling or miniature golf and you have a competition of doing this, or, I'm just trying to think of other things that are sort of outside the box, but there are many ways for this to be accomplished. And more than anything, you need a facilitator that can guide you along the way. And I think that's what we are very good at, is to be able to provide that piece that keeps people on track.
And so what does success look like in the next chapter?
Exactly everything we've been saying for the last 27 minutes. A lot of this is going to build upon itself, just like I've done for the last 35, 40 years in business. If you look back on everything that we have done together in business and leading up to today, every single piece is part of that puzzle that leads up to today.
Absolutely. Well, Robert, thank you so much for sharing this story and giving people a look behind the scenes of this transition. If today's conversation resonated with you and you are leading a business, team, or organization through growth or change, connect with Robert and learn more through Dreamchaser Leadership. And thanks for listening to Peak Experience. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
From First Paw Media, this is the Peak Experience Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You will find a link in our episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you would give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Our producer is Robert Forto and created by First Paw Media.